The challenge takes place at Chilko Lake in Canada, a territory of grizzly bears, cougars, and wolves. As the production crew's boats depart, 10 participants are dropped off at their individual wilderness spots. The first contestant, Tim, never imagined he'd be selected by the show. Now, both excited and nervous, he sheds a few tears on camera. Having fished and hunted from a young age, Tim is skilled with traps, and even bears fall to his arrows. A father of 6, he joined the contest to improve his family's living conditions. Within half an hour of arrival, he spots 2 grouse, but also notices numerous grizzly bear tracks. This area has one of the highest populations of North American grizzly bears, making it impossible to completely avoid their range. The second contestant, Clay, quickly demonstrates his prowess this season. While scouting the woods, he spots an animal trail and decides to follow it, discovering several porcini mushrooms along the way. He collects a good number, continuing until the increasing number of fallen trees suggests no further discoveries. Suddenly, he spots a grouse, and with over a decade of archery experience, hits it from over 20 meters away, impressing viewers. After preparing the grouse by the lake, he separates his cooking area from his living space to avoid attracting bears. Just as he is about to start cooking, he hears a noise behind him. Turning around, he's startled by a cougar staring intently at him. Rather than retreat, Clay charges, hoping to drive the cougar up a tree. If he had his bow with him, the encounter might have ended differently. His bravery is undeniable. The next contestant, Matt, is initially disoriented by the new environment. His confusion is quickly disrupted by the sight of a moose swimming in the lake, though it's too far for his bow. Like Season 6 champion Jordan, capturing the moose would have provided sustenance for the duration of the challenge. Matt and his wife are instructors of primitive skills, adept at tool making and hunting. With over 20 years of experience making fire in the wilderness without matches, he chooses to rely on friction fire starting, though the high altitude doubles the usual time required to ignite a fire. After last night's heavy rain, Billy's tarp accumulated a lot of water. He filtered out the gravel with his teeth and took big gulps directly on camera. Billy, who loves music and the wilderness, usually spends his time managing his band and studying various wilderness survival skills. Recently, his fiancée became pregnant with twins. Participating in Alone was mainly to win the prize money for his family. The other contestants are similar, with overalls and bows in hand. Billy searches for game near the campsite but finds nothing but berries. He wanders to the lake where he spots a rivet in a piece of driftwood washed ashore. Without any knives on his trip, he spends considerable effort to remove the rivet, hoping to forge it into a knife. He first heats it in the charcoal, then pounds it with the back of an axe, and after some polishing, he has a makeshift wilderness knife. Turning back to Tim, considering the potential dangers of grizzly bears and cougars, he decides to focus on building a luxurious shelter before addressing food. He constructs a square foundation with log joints on the ground, leaving space for a door. He then angles 2 logs for the roof frame and fills the gaps in the walls with stones and moss, finally covering it with the tarp. With his deluxe shelter complete, he can focus on food without worry. Ross is the first female contestant this season. She has been sleeping in a temporary shelter by the lake, now busy looking for a permanent settlement. Despite her gentle appearance, she's tough enough to take on crocodiles and is determined to hunt all 29 large North American animals with a bow, aiming to prove she's as capable as any man. She finds a suitable clearing not far from the lake and decides to move there. Determined, she binds 2 tripods with rope, then covers them with a tarp for a simple shelter. The smaller space helps retain heat, and the sealed smoke from the fire won't bother her, allowing her a brief respite. By day 4, Tim, having spent a lot of energy building the shelter and consequently losing 6 pounds in 4 days, is desperate for food. He uses a stone to hunt grouse, a bizarre choice given his skills with a bow. His toothbrush comes in handy. He cuts the end, makes a hole, and attaches a fishing hook with a line to act as a lure. He plans to try fishing by the lake, but strong winds make it difficult to cast the line, so Tim decides to return to his shelter and rest. On the second day, Clay made a fishing rod from a branch and fashioned a reel. Expanding the shelter requires energy. On day 5, he went fishing at dawn. After about an hour, he felt a tug on the line. Clay successfully landed a 2.5-pound rainbow trout, the first fish of the season, using only a bottle cap and umbrella cord as bait. Before moving, Ross ate a lot of bearberries since she couldn't find any other substantial food. These berries alone sustained her. but they led to abdominal pain and nausea that night. The high fructose content in wild berries can cause bloating, pain, and vomiting. She spent much of the night awake and vomiting up the berries she ate during the day. Tim was even unluckier. That afternoon, he went out looking for food and saw a grouse fly into the bushes. His intense desire and rapid breathing from excitement, coupled with days of little food and low energy, triggered a heart attack. Ignoring the grouse, he hurried back to his shelter with severe chest pain. Knowing he had a history of heart issues, and despite not wanting to disappoint his supportive wife, he tearfully made the call to withdraw from the competition, becoming the first to be evacuated on day 6. The next contestant, Colt, joined because his mother is a huge fan of wilderness survival shows. He lives alone on a deserted island, where he installed his own utilities and spent 42 days alone last winter, making the competition relatively stress-free for him. While acclimating, he found a path made by a grizzly bear with plenty of berries nearby, requiring him to stay extremely alert. The 7th contestant, Nate, served 24 years in the military, including in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He developed a resilient personality under pressure and knows how to make fire by friction and set traps. Near his starting point, he spotted a grouse in a tree. After setting up the camera, he stepped into frame, drew his bow, and aimed. Despite the close range, his arrow missed, flying just below the grouse. The 8th contestant, Teresa, a rare expert in Stone Age skills, is proficient in making tools from stones, bones, and wood. She joined the competition to win the prize money to maintain her ideal lifestyle. Upon arrival, she quickly found berries and edible plants. Teresa swiftly chose a temporary campsite, setting up a simple tent with a tarp and a leaning tree trunk, and placed her cooking site by the lake to avoid attracting bears, showing thorough consideration. Michelle starts by showing a close-up of a cricket to the camera, then braces herself mentally before popping it into her mouth, crunching away. The taste isn't bad, just a bit tough on the teeth. Michelle has lived for 4 years in Alaska and with Siberian natives, learning many survival skills, including setting traps and identifying edible plants. Despite her petite frame, she possesses a strong inner spirit. Initially, her survival strategy focused on gathering plants. She found a lot of nodding onions on a hillside, a collector's paradise. Cooked, these onions provide about 20 calories per 100 grams. She quickly gathered a large amount, getting off to a smoother start than others. She also found plenty of rose hips. While eating them, she inadvertently spotted a grizzly bear swimming towards her from across a lake, several meters away. Frightened, Michelle quickly hid in the woods and watched the bear move away before she felt safe again. Teresa, while still energetic, wants to get her shelter in order. She plans to build a pit house, a semi-subterranean dwelling excellent for warmth. Without ideal tools, she uses sticks, stones, and found moose bones to dig into the earth. Throughout the process, she finds insect larvae in the soil and snacks on them as appetizers. After 5 to 6 hours, she expends thousands of calories. Jordan, the last contestant, eats ants found in wood for breakfast, noting their sour taste resembling lemon juice, although in frustratingly small quantities. He finds a clearing in the jungle where he plans to build his long-term residence. Building and hunting are his strengths, having spent much time in the wilderness. He joins the show to win the prize money to pay off his mortgage and spend more time with his wife and kids. Jordan plans to build a lean-to cabin using logs as thick as thighs. Although it consumes a lot of energy, once built, it will save him more in the long run. He uses mortise joints to assemble the logs into a square structure, nearly completing half by midday. He sleeps in a small tent made of tarp, and at 10:30 p.m., half asleep, hears a large animal moving outside. Judging by the sound, it's a bear, but luckily, it's scared off by the noise he makes. The next day, he finds a small path about 30 to 40 meters from his camp, explaining the bear's visit. Reluctant to move again, his priority is to find food, as building the house is physically demanding. Colt chose extra tarp over a fire starter, making him the second contestant this season to do so. His first 2 attempts at making fire with a bow drill went smoothly, but today he struggled and became worried. Eventually, he managed to start a fire with great effort and vowed never to let it go out again. Unlike others who prioritized building shelters, Colt decided to build a boat first to fish in the lake for food. Despite never having built a boat before, his rowing experience helped him craft it adequately. He wrapped it with the extra tarp he chose and filled it with more sticks to increase buoyancy and fully stretch the tarp. The simple structure didn't take long to complete. He then carved paddles with an axe and eagerly launched the boat for a test. Good news, it had enough buoyancy. Bad news, it lacked stability and needed additional braces. Yesterday, Nate picked chanterelles, planning to make soup this morning, but squirrels stole half of them, souring his mood. To ensure survival, he planned to fish using a trot line, a main line with baited branch lines at intervals for better chances of catching fish. After setting it up by the lake, he only needed to check it periodically. Nate initially intended to collect wood for his shelter, but encountered the squirrel and retrieved the stolen mushrooms. He considered shooting it to improve his meal. After collecting some wood, Nate built a simple A-frame shelter, placed acorns on the sides, covered it with a tarp, and finished his task. He then checked the trot line. Lake Chilkoot was generous without much hassle, and he smoothly pulled a fish ashore. Though not very large, the fish, along with chanterelles and berries stewed together, helped alleviate his fatigue. After digging the underground part of her pit house, Michelle started on the frame. She dug a post hole in the center and selected driftwood from the abundant supply by the shore. After installing the chosen post and stabilizing it with stones and sand, she arranged logs around it and secured them with wire at the front. Her shelter was half complete. As another female contestant, Michelle's shelter was much more solid than Nate's. She placed a beam between two tripods, essentially creating a larger version of Nate's shelter with a similar construction method but more interior space. Day 7 arrived, and Billy started building early in the morning. He first secured the roof beams and pillars, scraped off the bark to prevent fire hazards, and protect the tarp from punctures. Extra measures were taken for the wind-facing wall by layering branches and bark. With that, the basics were covered. Driftwood found by the shore was perfect for making a bed. He gathered branches for padding, and lying on it was extremely comfortable. His shelter was nearly complete, but his stomach was still empty. He almost caught a fish yesterday, but it slipped off the hook. So far, he hadn't seen a single grouse or deer, and the dense tree population made hunting impractical. He planned to check the opposite side of the bay. Unable to cross by land, he swam across in just a bathing suit, despite the water being only 11 degrees Celsius. After swimming 800 meters, he was disappointed by the dense trees and only a few berries on the other side. His arrows were blocked by branches, and he swam back empty-handed, wasting thousands of calories. Tonight, he would have to make do with a soup of petals and roots. Worried about the approaching autumn and the potential lack of even grass to eat, he envied Clay, who had the best food supply so far. Clay started with grouse and mushrooms, caught a trout, and still had half left by day 7. Fearing a bear might steal it, he tied the legs of his spare underwear tight, placed the fish inside, and hung it mid-air. With a relatively ample food supply, his house was almost finished. He used moss to fill the gaps between wood and stones in the fireplace, tested the fire, and was pleased with the perfect results. Now focused on food, Clay, knowing he was lean, realized he couldn't survive just by enduring hunger. He needed to hunt big game like elk to have a chance. He targeted an open, bushy slope, thinking it likely to find deer. When he arrived, he discovered it was a forest devastated by fire, with wood scattered all over the ground, making navigation difficult. After a fruitless and exhausting hunt, he luckily found many berries in a meadow. Planning to save some for later, he utilized the principle that cold air sinks. He dug a hole in a low spot, enclosed it with wooden panels, lined it with moss, and stored 4 liters of berries for gradual consumption. Matt's situation wasn't much better than Clay's. He too hadn't secured any meat. He resorted to digging up wild chives, chopping them up and cooking them with other wild greens to make a soup. It barely provided enough calories. After finishing the soup, he planned to go hunting with his bow and arrow, only to find that mice had chewed through the bowstring overnight. Furious, Matt cursed the mice in a long tirade. It would be a huge loss to quit the competition over this, so he tried to repair the string. Although not as good as before, it was still functional. Later, Matt set up a deadfall trap, determined to make the mouse pay for its actions and to add some meat to his otherwise vegetarian diet. Turning to the female contestant Ross, her shelter was probably the simplest. She had started foraging early, crafting a fishing rod from wire and branches, complete with a reel and lure, trying to approach modern fishing techniques. She hoped to catch 7 or 8 fish a day, but by 6 p.m. by the lake, Not even a nibble had occurred. Fish resources were not as abundant as in Canada's Great Slave Lake from Season 7. That evening, just as Ross was about to turn off her camera and sleep, she heard disturbances outside. Judging by the sounds, it was a hungry grizzly bear. Close to hibernation, anything could be its meal. Ross quickly fired bear bangers into the sky, scaring the bear away while she sat in her shelter, shaken, but thinking of the $500,000 prize. Another female contestant, Michelle, had a harder day. She dug up a few cow parsnip plants during the day, using the hollow stems to blow on her fire and roasting the root bulbs to eat. Native Americans also used these as food. Michelle took a bite with a tentative mind, but the taste was horrible, not at all pleasant. Only the fish in the lake could provide all the nutrients her body needed. She made a longer fishing rod, weighing it down with rocks by the lake, hoping for a good catch. She planned to expand her shelter but soon felt nauseous, from her stomach to her armpits. She had mistaken water hemlock for cow parsnip, as they look similar. But the former is highly toxic. Michelle chewed some charcoal in an attempt to neutralize the poison. She woke up around 5 a.m. feeling slightly better. Luckily, she had only taken a small bite, or withdrawing from the competition would have been unavoidable. Jordan, originally a carpenter, was obsessed with making his shelter perfect. Sadly, time and energy were not on his side. However, the quality of his shelter was the best among the contestants this season. Now Jordan desperately needed food to replenish his strength. He couldn't remember how many times he had tried fishing. After waiting tirelessly for 2 to 3 hours, he was in disbelief when he finally dragged a fish to shore, shouting with joy. The fish weighed over 2 pounds, enough to feed Jordan for at least 3 days. He quickly cleaned and prepared the fish, planning to make a fish head soup and enhance the flavor with chopped wild yellow essence roots. While the soup was cooking, he smoked the other slices of fish for dehydration and storage. On day 13, Teresa hung up her freshly washed underwear and, adopting a semi-sitting posture, became an expert in warming herself by the fire before returning to building her shelter. The frame of the house was ready. Next, she would lay the walls using large pieces of bark from dead fir trees stacked from bottom to top like tiles and fill the gaps with pine shavings for better insulation. She had left spaces for the fireplace and door. Looking at the empty interior, she planned to make a comfortable bed using wire to bind several logs together to form a frame, then laying wooden planks topped with grass and branches to mimic a mattress. Nate, feeling a bit desperate for food, decided to sunbathe to replenish some vitamins, as the continuous strong winds made fishing impossible. His fishing lines were washed back by the waves. After much thought, he decided to build a dock in the deep water area, hoping it might help. Using dovetail joinery techniques learned from his neighbor, he connected several logs into piles. However, as he carried them into the lake, he was annoyed by the water temperature and frustrated when the piles visibly fell apart. Realizing he had forgotten to install support beams, Nate wasn't discouraged. He focused on solving the problem rather than complaining. Previously, the boat Colt had used was unstable, so he made 2 small boats using the last bit of tarp and bound them with fir wood as external braces. On retesting them in the lake, there were no issues. Not only was the stability greatly improved, but the maneuverability was also excellent, allowing forward, backward, and rotational movement. Colt was thrilled and immediately stripped down to jump into the lake for a relaxing bath. However, his enjoyment was short-lived, as he spotted a grizzly bear staring at him from a distance and slowly approaching. Colt quickly fired a bear banger, which initially had no effect. The bear paused for a few seconds, then continued advancing. Colt fired a second shot, which made the bear retreat into the woods a few steps, but it still lingered and approached again. Only the third bear banger scared it away. That night, Colt was still shaken from the day's events, relieved that the bear had finally left. Hand the painting to craftsman Jordan. With the fish he caught a few days ago, he is living comfortably without worrying about food. The smoked fish has a reddish hue and is fragrant, tasting even better than he expected. The cabin is almost complete, only lacking a door. Jordan plans to make the door with wire and wood and install it with hinges for opening and closing. Without an electric drill, he uses his imagination, cuts a groove in the wood with a saw and secures it with wire to the wall and the door's crossbars. He binds it with harder wood, fitting it perfectly. Finally, he uses a bent branch as a door latch. With this, the cabin is complete. On day 16, Colt dreamt of delicious food and decided to treat himself today since he hasn't eaten meat in half a month. He paddled to the center of the lake, and immediately a fish bit his line, but it got away before he could pull it out of the water. Over the next 3 hours, he had 4 bites but failed to catch any fish. His fishing skills clearly need improvement. Fortunately, his perseverance paid off, and he finally caught a rainbow trout weighing about half a pound, proving that his boat and fishing methods were effective. He quickly thought of several fishing techniques to try in the future, feeling a step closer to the $500,000 prize. To prevent homesickness, Jordan's main strategy is to keep himself busy. This time, he decides to make a pipe. He drills a hole in a stick to form the bowl, cuts off the excess, and carves it slightly for style, then inserts a hollow branch as the handle. He completes his wilderness-style pipe and fills it with traditional Native American tobacco, living more and more refinedly by the day. Nate sits in his camp, drinking freshly brewed pine needle tea. A squirrel is on a nearby branch. Let's look at contestant Ross. Her breakfast is unappetizing seaweed. So far, she hasn't caught a single fish. Now, she hopes to catch some small fish with a fish trap to sustain herself for another month. However, the trap is crudely made. Large fish cannot enter, and small fish can escape. She places it in the shallow waters near the shore, securing it with stones. Time will tell, but she expects to catch nothing. Fortunately, there are berries in the grass, which have been her sole source of nutrition these days. As days pass, the berries either fall to the ground or turn black. She believes they will all be gone in half a month. Since Jordan finished making his pipe, he seems to have lost his spirit, completely absorbed in missing his family. Keeping busy no longer helps him cope. Viewers of wilderness survival shows can probably guess that he ended up making the expected call to quit the competition. Over to Clay, who hasn't had a successful catch since landing a 2-pound rainbow trout on day 5 of the challenge. Today, he decides to make a scoop net. He crafts the frame himself and uses the inner core of a parachute cord. It takes him half an hour to finish the net. He heads to a spot he scouted earlier. It seems the fish in the lake know he's equipped with a net, as now they won't even bite the hook. Michelle finds a few snails, which taste like crispy chicken. These days, she relies on snails and crickets for protein, having not had a proper meal. Her fishing rods, placed in the lake, haven't yielded anything either. Like Ross, she plans to make a fish trap, but her craftsmanship far surpasses Ross's. She persists through the hardship, hoping to use the prize money to care for her brother-in-law, who has Down syndrome. Michelle places her fish trap in deeper water, hoping to catch some fish. Matt is under significant pressure. As a survival instructor by profession, he hasn't achieved notable success in the challenge. Others have at least shot a grouse, but he hasn't even caught a fish until now. Suddenly, Matt finally catches a rainbow trout, though it is as small as the one Nate caught earlier. He eagerly returns to make a soup with wild chives, savoring every bit, including the leftover fish bones. Such a small amount of food can't fill his hungry stomach after half a month. His solution is meditation, using his thoughts to communicate with his family to alleviate his pain. He then realizes his shelter lacks insulation. He might manage now, but it won't be good as the weather cools. Being the contestant with the least body fat, he needs to enhance his warmth measures. Matt finds a dense grassy area in the forest and decides to gather some dry grass for bedding. Unexpectedly, he disturbs a ground wasp nest preparing for winter. Several stings later, he runs out. Billy made a knife from a rivet he pulled out of deadwood and showed it off in front of the camera. It works well for chopping wood. Only 18 days into the challenge, he has already lost 31 pounds. Although he is quite heavy, he can't keep this up forever. The dense forest in his area makes hunting impossible, so he plans to weave a fish basket from willow branches to catch fish in the lake. While talking to himself and weaving the basket, he suddenly hears noises from the slope below and turns to see 2 grizzly bears. He quickly fires a bear banger, scaring them away. It's his first encounter with grizzlies in decades. His heart is still pounding after the danger has passed. When he places the finished basket in the lake, he wonders if it can really catch fish in such shallow water. Michelle, having nothing else to do, constructs a conical shelter to protect her fire. After working, she feels unprecedentedly weak. She desperately needs food as she only has berries and wild vegetables today, which provide very little energy. To get enough salt, she even eats her own mucus, but she's still getting weaker by the day. She hopes the fish basket will yield some results, but upon reaching the lake, she's stunned to see it empty, either washed up on rocks or possibly retrieved by a bear, plunging her spirits. Unable to imagine how she'll continue, she even notices her teeth discoloring from malnutrition. Feeling close to her limit, she remembers seeing some grouse near her dwelling. She takes her bow and arrows and puts her last hopes on hunting grouse. After wandering in the woods for several minutes, her legs are weak, and despite her efforts, she sees no grouse. She collapses in a chair at her campsite. Just then, she sees a grouse hiding behind a tree within her sight. She quietly approaches for a shot, but the grouse dashes into the bushes and disappears. With her last hope gone, she decides after a moment of thought to call and quit the competition. On the 21st day of the challenge, 7 contestants remain. Due to poor fishing results, Clay shifts his hopes back to hunting. Otherwise, with his physique, he definitely cannot compete with the other heavyweights. He walks a long time to a previously unexplored forest area. Calming down, he carefully observes his surroundings and listens to the sounds of animals. Finally, he discovers a good sign: a pile of deer droppings, the first deer trace he has found since the start of the challenge. Since it's getting late, he heads back. Matt is the only survival coach this season, but has not met his own expectations. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. Regardless of how others might criticize him in the future, at least his family won't mock him. He decisively made the call to withdraw from the competition. After finding the area with deer activity, Clay followed the same route back the next day. Seeing fresh droppings on the ground, he surmised the deer were still active in the area. Around noon, he indeed spotted a black-tailed deer staring straight at him. Afraid to startle it, Clay froze in place. Once the deer lowered its guard and began to move, he seized the opportunity to shoot an arrow.